is really the ideal customer for a SmartPAD deployment at the end of the day?
Man, that's a good question. It's somebody who's really wanting to focus on keying in their operation and making data-driven decisions.
Yep.
And being able to take the data and use it in a manner that's going to help them improve their current operation, but also future operations, right?
Yep.
And then the more kind of the ones that are more forward thinking and innovative is like, how can we take this data and couple it with production data?
Yep.
And then circle it back to drilling so that you're optimizing the entire cycle. Because right now you've always had great data on drilling.
Yep.
And you've had really good data on production.
Yep.
The kind of black hole has always been completions.
Yep.
And, it was, not too long ago, the data was transferred for completions on a thumb drive.
Oh.
And I remember when I first got in the field, we were burning CDs.
Yeah.
If you ever tried to burn a CD in a dusty field data van, good luck, because there's grime and dust and everything.
Probably would take an hour to do it.
CD drive and everything else, right?
Yep.
And then you take that, you might drop in a FedEx envelope, or somebody might be going to the town where the operator was located and be like, hey, can you drop this by the office?
Yeah.
And then you were trying to put some stuff on servers, which there wasn't necessarily enough room for it, to transfer the data. And I remember so we shut down frac, I think, in 16, sold in 17. I was one of the last remaining guys from frac that was stayed at Weatherford. And I remember fielding phone calls from, past operators like, hey, do you have any data from this well that y'all fracked for us like 5 years ago? And let me look and see. I'll try to find something.
Yep.
And typically all I could find was some invoices and chemical usage sheets. There was nothing really about the treatment.
Yeah.
And so I'd get on the phone and be like, man, I can't really find anything. Y'all don't have any of the files?
Yep.
And anyway, well, they were probably on a thumb drive and they got left in a desk drawer somewhere. And we've had a lot of turnover because it was during the downturn.
Yep.
We don't know where they went.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of companies who did not have files for wells that they had fracked. We could figure out the chemicals pumped, which is great for regulatory.
Yeah.
But to actually see what their treatment schedule was, I did an audit for a company and I had to sign off all kinds of paperwork, NDAs, but they had to grant me access to a whole bunch of email boxes for people who were no longer employed.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to sort through, I guarantee you, I sorted through probably 70 to 100,000 emails looking for certain things to facilitate this audit. I think it was about a $3 or $4 million audit.
Wow.
And the operator was lacking the same information. So we were basically in a room just going back and forth like, okay, I can't prove this, but I found an email where they talked about changing a price or they talked about changing this design because you say you were only supposed to pump 300 and we, 1,000 pounds and we pumped 400, but I found an email that kind of talks a little bit about it.
Yep.
And so we'd be like, okay, well, let's toss that claim out, move on to the next one.
Tell me about this audit process.
Yeah. So, it was an audit over invoices and, did we overcharge for certain things? Did we not do what we had, contractually stated? And a lot of these times, you have a contract, you have pricing in place and everything else. And especially during a busy time, you may have to supplement whether it's one chemical for one or a proppant type for another, or there's changes that the operator may make.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes those, as we know, a lot of people were, utilize text as a means of communication or a phone call.
Yep.
And it may not have been documented. And so this particular audit was, several $1 million. And, it got dropped in my lap because I was one of the last remaining frac guys that had any frac knowledge. And so, I got access to all these emails and I'm just doing searches and everything else and going through basically each well file it was like it was an audit that covered like 4 years worth of work.
Yep.
And, it was back and forth because what I found out was the operator didn't even have some of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have some of the data. And I was like, well, this is a pretty significant disconnect because unless somebody was working at the company at that particular point in time and had those files, they were lost.
Yeah.
And, they were doing the same exercise on their end, going through past emails, trying to find it.
Yep.
And so there was this kind of lack of data that was there. So where that also comes to play in is, they couldn't reference those past wells as to check and see what they did on them if they were going to develop adjacent acreage.
Yeah.
To see, do they even match up from a production, is what they treated them back then, was it a good path forward or are they starting from scratch?
Well, and it seems like, I guess, not being able to even keep track of that historic data It seems like in a way you're throwing out this incredibly valuable asset because, as you said, if there's another well nearby, you can utilize what you know about that particular well, what that particular job, when you do something over here. So it gives you a whole bunch of information as to what you can be doing with it. Has there been maybe a change in how data and maybe operators have been looking at this, or has it always been the goal to try to capture as much data as possible and make that always available?
I think that was always the goal, but there was just limitations.
Yeah.
And completions especially.
Yeah.
Right. And, like I said, all the stage reports, all the files that were pertaining to the treatment and everything else were, they were just stored, we thought we were high tech when we got thumb drives, like especially the big ones that you could have multiple files on.
Yep.
But again, those were just, temporary basically. And then you had, as technologies evolved, you didn't have they were all on-prem servers and there was limited space sometimes to try to put these big files in. So they didn't necessarily always get uploaded.
Yeah.
And where it comes into play for future state, especially as operators are looking to maybe divest an asset, sell it. I've had people tell me that having all this data makes it much more valuable when they go to sell as opposed to what they had before. So when you had all this kind of like just incomplete data, you couldn't really show them how you treated the well.
Yep.
And they go to sell, they'd be like, okay, well, we know the production. Okay, cool. But when you have all this extra data that goes with it, you have all the past history. It's like, would you buy a car if you had zero clue what anybody had done to it?
Yep.
You might, but is it going to be more valuable? You're going to pay more money for it if you know all the maintenance history of the car, right?